Let's talk your favorite football player. Thought you were going to blow a gasket last week. Hendon Hooker.
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay. I am excited about Mr. Hooker and the possibilities he provides of also and tempering those expectations in regards to what he can be and what he means to the Lions. Not going to be that this year. All right, that's not what this discussion is. We had that discussion last week. Mm-hmm. But this discussion is over the fact that they activated him. They opened up his practice window, was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, but they have to now, they're at the decision of we either put him on the 53 or we put him back on the IR.
Where he can't practice.
Where he can't practice. You cannot be on the field and get reps, and there's not a lot of great reps going on right now, which is why he's not going to be playing in games. But you get a chance to work on some technique things. And it's Mark Brunell watching him in his drop, going through progressions, watching him running opposing offenses, talking to him about what he's looking at, what he's seeing, and the decisions that he's making. Those are all things that he's able to do right now, and they're able to evaluate. They're also able to work with him to try and improve on things that maybe they saw at Tennessee. We want to see you do this better. We've been talking to you about this. I've been watching film. How is he picking up what they've been talking about for the past 6 months? Now it's time to execute. You get a chance to see it, correct it, and then go out there the next day and do it better.
I have no issue with him occupying a roster spot. I just know there will be people who say if he is QB3, if he's not going to play in the games, if you've got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson also getting back after it, Aleem McNeil, the belief is, will be back before the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Kabinda, fullback. This team does use a fullback. Kind of forget about that. James Houston. If you start talking about 3 and 4 players that you need to add to this roster, are you maximizing the 53-man going into the postseason?
That's a decision to make when they're ready.
When they're healthy, you're saying?
When they're healthy, yeah. When they're ready. So C.J. Gardner-Johnson.
But you're not going to put Hooker on the practice squad. He's going to eat up one of the spots.
All right, well, okay, so he drops back in practice, and all of a sudden, maybe he slipped a little bit. And
John, are you talking about faking an injury?
No.
The integrity of the game?
But, knees swell, especially after an ACL surgery. And maybe he's got a little hamstring discomfort, so you put him back on IR. It's called managing the roster. Mm-hmm. Right?
And they've done a good job.
Creative ways to do that.
And they've done a good job creatively managing the roster. Another example is how they're handling the kicker right now. Not to get nerdy here, but we're talking roster. They took Riley Patterson off the roster to make room for Hendon Hooker. They can still use Badgley or Patterson on game day because of the elevation rule. You can elevate a player as many as 3 times from the practice squad to game day, and there are, I believe, 3 elevations left for Patterson, 2 for Badgley. They only have 3 more regular season games. They're going to be okay. They've done a good job managing the roster. I wonder if people didn't like the Hooker pick or don't want to see Hendon Hooker on the field, how do they feel about using one of those spots that could otherwise be a pass rusher, a defensive lineman, an extra player on special teams in the secondary? I mean, we already know they're cycling through the corner positions right now.
Right. So when C.J. Gardner is ready to play, that's a decision to make at that time. If and when Aleem McNeil is ready to play, it's a decision to make at that time. If and when James Houston is ready to play, it's a decision to make at that time. Right now, you don't have to. So you maximize the opportunity to have him on the practice field because he's a guy that you want to find out as much as you possibly can in the time that you're allotted. He wasn't able to practice.
I agree.
Coming off of ACL. We saw it with Jameson Williams last year. Jameson Williams comes back. All of a sudden, we all thought maybe we would see more, but you've got to work your way back into it. And not that Hendon Hooker's going to work his way into any type of playing position right now, but you've only got him for 4 years. It's not a first-round guy.
Yeah, I think if you're willing to use a third-round pick on a guy, this goes back to the day they drafted him. If you're willing to use a third-round pick, not a day 3 pick, but a third-round pick, there is some level of investment in developing him into an NFL quarterback. You have to do that now. He's missed time already this season, and what little can be gleaned from practice is still worthwhile if you think there's a shot that this dude is the future at the position. And it's not anointing him. It's simply keeping your options open. I don't want him on the field right now. He's coming off an injury. He hasn't processed NFL defenses. I don't want a gadget package or a set play for him. Don't take QB1 off the field. That is Jared Goff. He gives them the best chance to win games this season. But if you are keeping your options open, which is what drafting him implied, what developing him implies, he needs to be active. As wasteful as that may feel to use a 53-man roster spot on a third quarterback who won't get in the game even if Goff goes down, I think it is still part of the bigger picture for the Lions.
Yeah, and so Lions fans, are you okay with him taking up a roster spot right now? And here's the other factor involved, is he can be active without being active on game day. He's the third guy, and that's a rule that the Lions proposed, that you have a third quarterback that's not a part of, not going to take up one of the active spots, but you can activate him on game day. He's already on the 53, but you can activate him on game day if Jared Goff goes down, Teddy Bridgewater goes down, insert Hendon Hooker.
It's basically the Niners, the rule inspired by the San Francisco 49ers that the Lions put forward, where he's on the 53, but then he's not part of the 48-man that kicks off the game, but he could be emergency elevated.
Yeah, so he's your 48 and a half.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. 248-539-9797. How do you see them using Hendon Hooker at this point of the season, and is it worth a roster spot? I suppose, John, we'll get a better idea when guys get healthier, how they navigate it, but he will be one of the 53 effective yesterday.
Yeah.
And it may mean that they have to cut someone who is already playing or in the rotation because of it.
And it all comes down to, at that point, who is it that is going to get moved down to the practice squad or cut from the roster and removed from the Lions organization because Hendon Hooker is on the 53? That's going to be the question. But you don't draft a guy in the third round and think that at some point he's not going to be able to contribute to your franchise.
Yeah, and again, Goff has not received an extension yet, so you do need to keep your options open.
It's all TBD.
Yeah. Ticket Texter says, doesn't hurt that Hooker can give them a look like Prescott or Hurts in practice on scout team with the playoffs approaching. He's the only QB on the roster or practice squad capable of that. Do we make too big a deal of that, John? Because I heard when the Packers were preparing for Mahomes that Sean Clifford was playing the role of Mahomes. Like, do we over-exaggerate this stuff? I mean, you can't simulate Jalen Hurts.
Well, you can't simulate game situations to begin with. You can rehearse them.
Yeah.
You can go over them. You could talk about things, and you could see some things, but it's never like the real thing. And that's just something that, yeah, he could be. So could Teddy Bridgewater. Like, Teddy Bridgewater is a much more mobile quarterback than Jared Goff is. Now, he's not as good of a quarterback. Let's not start any of that type of conversation, but he could do that. The issue is, that's why the backup quarterback, the number 2 quarterback, is the best position in all of football. Because you play a couple of preseason games, and then you stand there with a clipboard. You don't practice a lot. You practice some in case you have to go into the game, but they don't want to risk you getting hurt because you're the one that has to go save the day if number 1 gets hurt. You don't want to get hurt in practice. So your practice squad quarterback or your number 3 quarterback, Hendon Hooker, is the one that's going to take all of those look squad looks.
Texter says, here's a thought. The Lions play the Vikings this weekend. They could clinch a playoff berth. So then could they potentially, put Hendon Hooker in afterwards?
Not in Dallas because number 2 is going to be at stake. Number 2 seeding.
Let's say they lose to Dallas. Let's say Minnesota, they've already locked up the 3 seed regardless of what happens.
They're not going to move up or down.
Yeah, hypothetically, it falls that way. Could he play the second half against Minnesota in a game that is largely meaningless for the Lions seeding?
Sure, and that goes to what type of rhythm do you want to have going into the playoffs? How much do you value preserving Jared Goff, preserving Frank Ragnow, and some of these guys that are dinged up, and you're going to need in the playoffs, say, hey, we want to take them out so that they don't get hurt. Because let's face it, if there's anything we know about Minnesota is that they are good at rushing the passer. So you could put Hendon Hooker in there. I'd have no problem with that. If they lose to Dallas, they've got the division locked up. That's fine. I don't care at that point. In fact, I'd kind of be intrigued to see.
I'd be interested too. Otherwise, our next real look is going to come in the preseason.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to derail this. Like, guys, I don't believe in Jared Goff long term, but you don't want to derail the season by running wildcat packages or third down, you're taking your quarterback off the field short yardage, red zone, you're taking your quarterback off the field. Put the guy in there who is in rhythm with the offense, who has a chemistry, who is playing well, and give him every chance to succeed.